Game Week 3 is here and it's time to select our teams. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan and I've got some transfers to make. Well, guys, I cannot lie to you. Game Week 2 for me was a disaster. And looking through my team for Game Week 2 before the Game Week started, I went in there really confident. I thought my team looked really good. And I think for the most part, it did look good. And maybe there are some issues in my team for sure. But in general, I think I've maybe got a little bit unlucky in general. But I don't want to make too many excuses for myself because looking through the team, clearly doubling up on the Crystal Palace defense was not a good idea. And I think I've overestimated Crystal Palace's defense based on last season because they have not been the same defense as they were previously. And maybe I underestimated some of their oppositions as well, Brentford and West Ham in the opening 2 games. So both of those players scoring 1 point was not good. Of course, Gvardiol, I would say, was just pure unlucky. For Ipswich to score from that one shot early on in the game is not something any of us saw coming, really. But one of those things, I guess you got to just roll with it. As for Nkunku, yeah, it seems like he's just a bad pick now. Chelsea have signed far too many attackers at this point. They're only looking to sign more. So Nkunku is no longer the player that we thought he was going to be in pre-season. So there's definitely an issue there. But I look at some of these other players. Eze taking so many shots again, 7 shots in Game Week 2. How on earth none of them have gone in? He came so close hitting the woodwork. We need to talk about him a little bit more in the team selection section of the video. Muniz taking the most shots of any player in Game Week 2, but didn't find the back of the net with any of them. All 9 shots, by the way, in the box, which is absolutely crazy that he didn't score during that game. And Alexander Isak, well, I don't even know what's going on there. Newcastle just not looking themselves at all. So we need to make some changes. We need to figure out what has gone wrong and how we can resolve it. And luckily, we've got 2 free transfers to try and resolve some of these situations. And before we have a look at my plans for Game Week 3, make sure you have liked the video. It really does help out the channel so much. And subscribe as well if you're new around here and want to see new FPL videos every single day. Okay, so looking ahead to Game Week 3 with those 2 free transfers, we're going to start off in goal with Henderson. He is still in my team, the 4.5 million goalkeeper. And at the start of the season, I was convinced he was the best 4.5 million goalkeeper. At this point, I still think that is probably true. The issue is that none of the 4.5 million goalkeepers are really filling us with confidence, so it's really difficult to pick one out, and maybe spending more money on a goalkeeper might be a wise idea, and I need to think about whether I need to make a goalkeeper transfer or not. Going into defense, a bright spark in my team is definitely Trent Alexander-Arnold. Liverpool have been a really strong defense so far this season, with them actually putting up the best defensive numbers in the opening 2 game weeks. They've only conceded 0.8 expected goals so far, which is better than the likes of Arsenal and Man City, which is quite incredible. Trent also very impressive with those creative numbers, 1.53 expected assists already, which is absolutely phenomenal stuff. I'm very surprised he hasn't got more in terms of assists yet, but I'm sure those assists are coming very, very soon. And Manchester United, although that looks like a difficult game on paper, I believe Liverpool have kept clean sheets in 4 of their last games against Manchester United in the Premier League. So 4 out of 6 is really, really good for clean sheets. And I do think Liverpool thrive in this fixture. So I'm not really too worried about this one. I actually think Liverpool could do really well in this one, particularly when we look at how Liverpool have been so far with the fullbacks back in full swing, back in full form, doing what they do best, which is getting up the field and creating, which is very, very nice indeed. Gvardiol is going absolutely nowhere in my team. He was unlucky Game Week 2. Game Week 1 got the clean sheet. And I think moving forward over the next 2 game weeks, we can continue to trust those Man City defenders. Same with players like Rico Lewis. I think they're good for a little while longer. And Daniel Munoz. This is where I have the issue because I've got those 2 Crystal Palace defenders and right now the defense is not clicking. I know Crystal Palace are looking to sign more defenders. They've just signed Lacroix, which is going to really improve them, but is he going to be ready for Game Week 3 against Chelsea? I'm not sure. And I recognise that Chelsea are a brilliant attack, even if they aren't a great defense. One thing about Munoz that I loved about him last season, that he was getting into a lot of good attacking areas, taking shots and creating. And although he has been pushing up, making a significant amount of touches in the box, we haven't quite seen those creative numbers yet. He's only had 1 key pass and no shots so far in the Premier League. So maybe spending 5 million on him was not such a good idea after all. It's very difficult though, because we have a lot of data from last season, but not much data from this season. So am I overreacting here on the Crystal Palace defense? And could they actually be okay? It's difficult to say. My one issue is, do I want to wait around and find out? That's the question. Can I maybe target some points in the immediate term whilst I wait for Crystal Palace to resolve themselves defensively? That's kind of my question. Is there any way I can move a Henderson or Munoz out and replace them with someone who is going to do a little bit better for me in the short term between now and my planned wild card in game week 7? That is a big question. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, guys. What would you do? Would you stick with the Crystal Palace defenders, or would you just say, enough is enough for now? We need to see more evidence of a strong defense before we go in on these players. But regardless, let's move on into the midfield players. Saka, Mr. Consistent, plays against Brighton next. And I don't actually think this is an amazing fixture for him, but I'm just confident that he can perform as he always does, very solidly, very consistently, just picking up those points slowly throughout the season. I don't think Saka is a captain option for me necessarily, but I definitely recognise his strengths as a set and forget player in my FPL team. No concerns there, particularly not until that Man City game. And even after that, Arsenal's fixtures do look really good. And how about Diogo Jota? Wow, what a player he has been so far. In fact, he has got the best expected goal numbers of any player in the Premier League outside of Erling Haaland. Now, that is a big number indeed. 1.54 XG in the opening 2 games, which is really nice. 3 big chances as well, which is, again, only behind Haaland. If we're looking for the best attackers in the league for numbers so far this season, well, Jota and Haaland are those 2 guys. And against Manchester United, where Liverpool do score so many goals in these games, often keep clean sheets as well, I think this is a real opportunity for him. And the great thing about Liverpool is the good fixtures just keep coming. They've got great fixtures on and on and on. And I do have confidence that they can do the business here against Manchester United. Eberechi Eze is next. I think he has got to be considered Mr. Unlucky in FPL so far this season. But thankfully, I've got my lucky crab shirt on today, which some of you guys might know about from previous seasons. And certainly looking at this game for Eze, I think Chelsea still have not proven themselves defensively. They conceded a lot of chances against Wolves last week, which is definitely going to give some opportunities for Eze. And I know people will say, okay, Eze, he's just not getting FPL points right now, and they will consider selling him. But from where I sit, from what I have seen him have a goal unfairly disallowed. So he has scored, for the sake of looking at if he's going to score goals in the future, well, he has already scored a goal. It didn't count for FPL terms, but he has scored a goal. So looking towards the future, he has got that form. He looks brilliant when he's playing. He is taking an insane amount of shots. No player in the Premier League has taken more shots in the opening 2 games than Eberechi Eze with 12 shots, which is really nice. And also, he has scored a goal that actually counted in the League Cup this week. So he scored and assisted against Norwich in the League Cup. And again, he looked fantastic in that game as well. So I definitely appreciate that some people who have Eze in their team, who maybe don't watch as much football or maybe don't look at the stats, might just think Eze's just playing badly. He needs to be removed. But I've watched every minute of Crystal Palace so far this season, including the League Cup game, and I can tell you that this guy is on the verge of exploding for points, particularly when we get to the likes of Leicester, Manchester United, Everton, which are really nice opportunities for goals and assists. And even Chelsea, I think, is a reasonably good fixture for Eze as well. And that brings us to the final player in my midfield, which is Nkunku. Spoiler alert, I have already made a transfer for Nkunku that I will be sharing with you shortly. But as I mentioned earlier, the problem is with him, there's too many attackers at Chelsea, and it seems like Maresca is going to be rotating his players a lot. Even Game Week 3 Golden Boy or Game Week 2 Golden Boy Madueke didn't even start in Game Week 1. So that just goes to show that he's still very much playing around with his team. And although I do think Nkunku is a brilliant player, and I have no doubt he will be back on our minds, in our thoughts later on in the season, right now, we just cannot take that risk with all of the rotation. The Maresca rotation, he's becoming like the new Guardiola, and it's gonna definitely cause some upsets in FPL, and I don't want to be around for it. So that transfer is done. Up front, Erling Haaland, what can we say? Obviously, brilliant start to the season for him with his hat-trick last game week. taking the like a lot of shots, not as many as Eze, but the most XG, so he's getting those shots in dangerous areas, which is very nice indeed. And I expect that to continue to run against West Ham and Brentford next. Isak is still in my team now, although I'm not going to have the same conversation about Isak as I did with Eze, because I have to be honest, Isak is not performing in the same way as Eze is. He doesn't look as good as he maybe should be. So I want to make sure you guys know I'm not just saying any player who has blanked that I have in my team must be good, must be unlucky. That is not the case. Eze has been unlucky. Isak has not been unlucky. He's not taking very many shots. Only 5 shots so far this season, which is okay, but it's not quite good enough for me. 1 big chance so far, 0.26 XG so far, and even maybe a little bit fortunate with his assist in game week 1. Only 2 key passes so far this season. So the numbers aren't there for Isak, but we do know he is a brilliant player, and Tottenham Hotspur at home for Newcastle is a nice fixture. It's just a case of whether Newcastle can get their stuff together, because right now it's not quite clicking for them. Maybe the League Cup win may give them some confidence, give them a boost to take into the next game week, because although they have got the results so far this season, when I've watched them play, I haven't been massively impressed, to be totally honest. But let's see what happens. Spurs, Wolves, next 2 fixtures. I think they're okay. I think it is worth holding on to Isak. He is definitely a player you could potentially sell, particularly if it allows you to bring in players that you really like. But I don't think he's a must sell or anything like that. Muniz, on the other hand, is another player who I have to say is unlucky. Like I said, most shots of any player last game week. It turns out Smith Rowe was the player to get the goal last week. But on another occasion, it's going to be Muniz getting the goals, because when you have high volumes of shots, these are the opportunities where you do eventually get goals, and everything balances itself out. 2 game weeks is a small sample size, and you can't make too many strong judgments there, but if you see a lot of positivity, I would rather have in my team right now, obviously in game week 2, I would rather have a player who took 1 shot and scored 1 goal. I would love to have them in game week 2, because game week 2 has already happened. But when I look towards the future, for players I want in the future, I would rather have a player who has far more shot volume, better XG, because I think that is showing that there's some sustainability to getting FPL returns longer term. And that's been proven time and time again in the world of FPL. So I'm not worried about Muniz at all. Ipswich Town is the next fixture. I think that's a really nice one. And in general, I think Fulham still have some good fixtures to come. So I think he should be absolutely fine. Going on to my bench, we have got Valdemarson, who is just going to stay on my bench as a 4 million goalkeeper. We've got Rodgers, who we selected in for game week 1. He's still kicking around in my bench, and I think this will be like his final trial game week, if you like, before I consider putting him in my starting 11, because although he has looked brilliant, his numbers aren't quite there yet. They're slightly better than Isak's, don't get me wrong, but 5 shots again for him, only 0.3 XG in the 2 games, a few key passes there, but nothing insane, nothing incredible that makes me want to desperately play him, even against Leicester. So 1 more trial game, and then Everton in game week 4, I think is the time where I might start considering playing Rodgers ahead of some of my other players, because although, if I kept Nkunku, I would play Rodgers for sure, but because I made a transfer there, I don't think there's any other weaknesses in my attack really after the Nkunku transfer. I don't feel a need yet to play Rodgers in my starting 11, but I'm sure that time will come where we have that confidence in him enough that he will be competing with the likes of, Muniz or maybe Eze even. I guess we'll see. Time will tell, won't it? Harwood-Bellis is going to stay on my bench, as is Johnson as well. And that is my team pre-transfers. And what I have to identify is what is just a bit of bad luck that will quickly balance out over the course of the season after we've had a more significant amount of sample size, and what actually is looking bad. And the 2 areas of concern in my team for me right now are the double Crystal Palace defense and the Nkunku. Those are the 2 concerns. Everything else in my team, I think, even though you can say, well, these players haven't scored very many FPL points yet, I think there's definitely confidence that we can move forward and get more points, and things will look a lot more balanced after maybe game week 4 or 5. But there are 2 areas that I do not like, and I need to resolve this situation, I think. Let me know what you think, guys, of course. But here are the transfers that I am making for Game Week 3. So the first transfer is done, and that is Nkunku out for Smith Rowe. And the other one I'm considering is Munoz to Robertson. So let's talk about those transfers in a little bit more detail. So Smith Rowe is already done. I did that before Nkunku dropped in price and actually before Smith Rowe rised in price as well. So I definitely enjoy the fact that I have essentially gained 0.2 million in team value for going on this this kind of transfer very, very early in the week. So my team value is all the way up to 100 million 0.5, which does show that the team is good. If your team is increasing in value, then you must have some desirable players in your team. And I think that's definitely where I'm at right now. Smith Rowe, his data is not amazing. 2 shots so far, but one of them was from a really good position where he got the goal. He's had 0.53 XG so far this season. So that is better than the likes of Rodgers. But more importantly, Smith Rowe is going to have some good fixtures coming up. Ipswich and West Ham are 2 nice fixtures. Even though West Ham did keep a clean sheet in Game Week 2, their defensive data is, pretty much just as poor as it was last season. So no real improvement there. And I like the Newcastle fixture as well. In general, I like these fixtures for Fulham. And I think Smith Rowe and Muniz, if I have both of them, then I've got the Fulham goals covered. And I see Fulham as a very much an improving team that could shock a few people this season for where they finish at the end of the season. As for my other transfer, this one is more data backed, really. And Munoz obviously not doing what I wanted him to do from an attacking perspective, and Crystal Palace not performing defensively. And I've replaced him here with a player who has the best defensive data in the Premier League so far. Obviously, Liverpool were 3rd last season behind Man City and Arsenal for the defensive data, but also they're number 1 this season. So good so far for them. We mentioned about Liverpool being able to keep clean sheets against Man United pretty regularly. But what is great about Robertson is that his attacking data is really good. And in fact, it's arguably better than Trent's because he's already had 2 shots, both inside the box, and generated 0.3 XG as well as 0.32 expected assists. Both fullbacks are playing really high. And given that I have loved what I've seen from Trent so much this season, well, why don't I just get myself another Trent, essentially? Because that is what Robertson is. And although I do think Trent is the better pick of the 2, Robertson comes in at 1 million cheaper. So to have both could be really nice. Now, the only downside to having adding Robertson to my team is it does make it difficult for me if I want to get Salah down the line. So if I wanted to bring in Salah to captain him in Game Week 5, where Haaland plays against Arsenal, that is going to be a lot tougher for me to do that. I mean, I could still potentially do a double swap, Haaland and Jota for Salah and some kind of forward. Not sure what forward that would be. Potentially we could do a Watkins potentially, depending on what prices are looking like at the time. We could maybe go to a João Pedro who has good fixes down the line as well. But if I wanted to do a Saka and an Isak to a Salah and João Pedro or something like that, which I think could be a really nice double transfer for a lot of people, if I go for Robertson, I'm locked out of that move. So that is the downside, but I see everything else as an upside. It's a risk. Do I limit my kind of ways of getting Salah into my team by bringing in a back to his old self Robertson in this team who is thriving under Arne Slot? I wonder. I like this move. It keeps with my theme of going for attacking defenders who have good clean sheet prospects and also attacking potential there as well, unlocking the potential for big scores. Both Trent and Robertson doing really well for bonus potential as well so far this season, getting very close to bonus points last game week. So I think that leaves me with a defense that I can just fully trust, and then I can just use my transfers on my attackers, leave the defense as it is, spend the transfers on the attackers, and that will give me something that I really like. Henderson is still maybe a bit of a problem, but at 4.5 million, he's a cheap guy, and we have to have some cheap guys somewhere. That's the game of FPL, right? We can't have premium players in every position. But this looks good. I think this team looks a lot better. Free transfers only used. I've fixed the 2 problem areas in my team and I think we can move on with confidence. The only player who I don't have full confidence in now is Isak, but knowing how good he is as a player, knowing he's on penalties, that can change very quickly as well. And I await more game weeks of data to try and, see what happens next, I suppose. But this is the good thing about FPL. You can have a bad start to the season, but the key is using the information, using your brain to try and resolve the problems and gain advantages from disadvantageous situations. And that's what I hope to do going into game week 3. Captain is on Haaland, not really thinking about changing that, and Diogo Jota is going to be my vice captain once again. Like I say, his data is just so good at the moment that I can see him continuing to perform. Like, this is what he does. And whenever Jota is on the pitch, he performs. And that is just going to continue until his eventual injury. But we'll worry about that when it happens. It certainly hasn't happened yet. So just looking at the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool to see if we've got any recommendations there of what kind of moves I can make. Because I'm still not 100% convinced by that Munoz move. And I think we can back it up by using this tool, to be honest. And by the way, guys, if you still haven't signed up to Fantasy Football Hub to get your team rating and to get your suggested transfers and all of the other brilliant tools and articles they have on their site and app, then you can still get 50% off. They're still running the 50% off deal for a short term. I don't think there's much longer on the 50% off deal, but what I can tell you is their win your mini league or your money back deal is going to actually expire within the next 24 hours. So if you did want to get in on the best discount and get the win your mini league or your money back, if you want to get that deal, then you need to do it now. You're running out of time. But regardless, guys, I'm going to show you what it is suggesting for my team. So first of all, we're going to go over to, first of all, let me show you that it actually rates Rodgers pretty highly. 4.5 predicted points in game week 3. After that, the predicted points do look a bit better than that, even so, against Everton and Wolves with 4.9 and 5 predicted points for each of those fixtures. So genuinely, the Rodgers shout could be really nice. He's definitely a player you can afford to play if you haven't got anything better in your team. So let's go to and have a look at my AI transfers, because this is big. This is really interesting. So it is straight up suggesting I make the same move, Munoz out, Robertson in, to gain a lot of predicted points over the next few game weeks. As you can see here, guys, it's very, very nice indeed, and there will be a difference there between the two players as I move towards my game week 7 wild card. So I think it's a really nice upgrade there that I can potentially make. It's also suggesting Nkunku to Elanga based on the fact that I haven't actually made my transfers on the Hub app yet. So it is assuming that I've basically taken the Nkunku price drop and can only afford Elanga. So it is also suggesting I use both of my transfers to sell Munoz and sell Nkunku. So it's come to the same conclusions as I have. These are the two players, these are the two problem area players that I need to sell. Of course, the fact that I could afford to go Smith Rowe earlier on in the week meant that I have just done that instead. But in terms of that Munoz and Robertson transfer, I mean, it looks good to me, and I think that really, really improves my team there as well. If we also swap Nkunku for the likes of Smith Rowe, and you can just kind of see what my team would look like for the next couple of game weeks. And by the way, I actually think Rodgers is going to slightly outscore Smith Rowe this week, which is pretty interesting, I suppose. But let's switch things about a little bit like that and save my plan. And I think, yeah, this looks reasonably strong now. And we've got a game week rating of 92%. Our team rating is back up to 96%, which is very strong because we were actually dropping to a team rating at the low 90s and high 80s before making transfers. So it's good to have that data-backed players back in my team. And going into the future game weeks as well, my team is going to look very strong again. I'll probably play Rodgers in game week 4 there, so my team will look a bit like this. Hopefully I can just roll the transfer in game week 4, and then game week 5, we can maybe start to deal with the who to captain situation and maybe bring in a new captain for that game week. And that's probably going to involve bringing in one of Salah or Watkins or maybe Palmer as well for this game week. I'm going to have a good think about it. Could potentially go for Son there as well. We'll see. But guys, like I said, last chance to get this very, very brilliant deal on Fantasy Football Hub. There's a link at the top of the description if you want to claim this deal for yourself and get going with your team rating, your suggested transfers, and start to improve and make those final decisions for your game week 3 team. And then it's the same again every week. Have that data backed up suggestions. So useful for when making those FPL decisions, and I couldn't recommend it enough. But that's it from me today. Make sure you do like the video, subscribe if you haven't done already. We'll be back tomorrow for a final decisions video, and why not check out another video if you haven't done already. YouTube is thinking you'll like that one. I'll see you later, mates. Bye bye.